Good morning, everybody. My name is Marco Pignataro, and I would like to introduce our second day of the culminating experience for the Berklee Global Jazz Institute Master Class of 2022. And we have the pleasure to start with our student Nikos. I'm going to read a little bit about Nikos. And bassist, arranger, and composer Nikos Chatzitsakos is an award-winning musician as a member of Ralph Peterson Gen X Big Band and as a leader of the Nikos Chatzitsakos Tiny Big Band. Born in Athens, Greece, Nikos has performed alongside distinguished musicians such as Frank Lacy, Antonio Art, Kiana Lionel, Sarah Rich, and George Contrafuris. Nikos' presentation comes with the presence of his advisor, Chase Morin, and the committee member, Patricia Perez. Please give a warm applause to Nikos.
Thank you, Marco, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. So today I will present you my CE. The title of it is We Should Care, and it's about the use of music as a tool that will highlight the need of solidarity in social justice issues. So, my CE consists of music written for 4 different social justice issues that I deeply care about and that happen in 2 countries that I resided, Greece and the United States. My goal through these tunes and the whole CE is to display the connection between these social justice issues that there is, and here comes the topic of intersectionality, which is important. For example, me with another person that we don't share the same race, ethnicity, language, or gender, we might have more things in common than phenomenally differences. Maybe we have the same class, maybe we have the same interests in life, and that brings us together more. The second thing that I like to display is the need for us to show solidarity to movements outside of our own political identity. And thirdly, I'd like to highlight the communal struggle that exists and that we have, and it's caused from the same systemic issues that benefit the few and not most of us. Last year, and this is how my CE came together in mind. Last summer, I came across on the internet of this powerful speech by Dr. Cornel West, which is entitled Moments of Interruption. And in that speech, Dr. West, he talks about the history of the USA, the events that the country has been based on, and he shows the way to move forward from these events to a better future. During his speech, he exposed some of the systemic issues that exist in the United States, and it's the imperialism, of course, of the United States, the racism that exists in this country, the exploitation of workers and people, and also the problematic roles, models that we have in our societies, and the ideals that we have, and the spiritual blackout that we're facing. A quote that I'd like to take, and I think it's very relevant to what I'm trying to do here today, is that what Cornel West said on the speech, and he says, so we become not just aware of other suffering, but we identify enough with that suffering that we want to do something about it. And a little bit about the music that you're going to hear for this track. So I composed music that is basically like a film score. The music goes with a speech, and I try to marry them together. There are a lot of influence from the blues, of course, both harmonically and melodic, and from Black American music, jazz of the 60s. Because of that era, what's going on around the social movements was reflected in jazz, and I think it's something that is relating to what he's talking about. So also the music, I transcribed his speech and put a melody on top of it. We have some open free improvisational sections, and we also interact a lot with what he's saying at the moment.
Most of human history is the history of domination. Most of human history is the history of oppression, the history of hatred, contempt, envy, resentment. How do you break that cycle? How do you create moments of interruption that can be sustained? if you're really gonna have to come to terms with the history of black people in the States, you're talking about slavery, Jim Crow, police brutality, self-hatred, self-violation, self-flagellation. You're really dealing with psychic, spiritual, social, political catastrophes. Democracy is the hearing and heeding of the voices of the victims of hierarchies that have been in place that have dominated and exploited people. And so what's fascinating about the United States, it's always been paradoxical. The American Revolution was both an interruption of the rule of empires. It was anti-imperial in a magnificent way, but it continued with forms of domination. That's why it was an imperial democracy. It continued with forms of domination vis-a-vis indigenous peoples, African slaves, white working men and women across the board, of course. So what is at stake is an imperial meltdown, the spiritual blackout. And what is a spiritual blackout? It is the relative eclipse of empathy, courage, integrity, honesty, decency, so that to be a gangster becomes the dominant way of life. I'm going to do anything to get over. I'm going to do anything to be successful. I'm going to do anything to get money. With money, power, fame becomes the fundamental pillars upon which too many young folk are socialized, because that's what they see in the imperial meltdown that we're experiencing. It's just a matter of trying to be honest, trying to be truthful, trying to be frank. That's what it's all about. How do you sustain a democratic hope in bleak times? Probably the most sublime feature, morally sublime feature of the species is that no matter how pervasive the domination is, it tends not to completely suffocate love, tenderness, struggles for justice, fighting for the poor, fighting for the vulnerable, the sparks of love of truth, the sparks of the love of justice, the sparks of the love of beauty, the sparks of the love of something bigger than oneself. There's something about the attempt to intervene and turn us around into our best, the shaking of we sleepwalkers into modes of awakening. So we become not just aware of others' suffering, but we identify with their suffering enough to want to do something about it. The history of the species at its best has to do with those who are willing to risk much, sometimes risking it all, to exemplify the grandest ideals. You have to try to ascend up the stairs to be a higher self, given the self that you are at the moment, and try to rely on that higher self and not that established self in place.
Thank you, everybody. So, yeah, during his speech, Cornel West, I mean, it's phenomenal. I had to listen to it again and again. During his speech, he also talked a lot about how the revolution in the United States brought an imperial democracy and not a real democracy by the term, right? So I started thinking a lot about this issue that is about the imperialism of the United States and how this has affected not only the country domestically, but also internationally. And I think a great resource for that is Noam Chomsky, that he exposed a lot of things that the United States have done. And one of them is like bringing military dictatorships all over around the world. This started with Iran, and we know because the CIA documents got declassified, and it happened in my country too, Greece. It also happened in Guatemala, Chile, and Brazil. It's just an aspect of the US imperialism. And yeah, the Greek junta is actually the coup, the military dictatorship that happened. and it came up at 67 until 74. And during that time, the dictatorship was characterized by the right-wing cultural policies, anti-communism, restriction on civil liberties, and imprisonment, torture, and exile of all political opponents. So yeah, during that time, there was a huge uprising in the protest that started from students in the Polytechnia, which was the university. It's called the Athens Polytechnic Uprising, and it escalated on 17th of November into a huge demonstration that involved all people that were against the junta. So yeah, during that day, a lot of people died or had, it ended up in bloodshed, and it ended up without tanks going inside the university where the protest happened. So yeah, the CIA was actually supporting the junta, gave a lot of resources and allowed that to happen. And yeah, I found a video that showed a little bit of what happened that day, and I created music for it. The form, the harmony, and the melodic content comes from the blues to show the similarities in the struggle of the people. And there are a lot of influence from the avant-garde and free improvisation inside the form of the blues, of course. So yeah, check it out. We don't have sound. Thank you. So yeah, another I think very important issue we're facing today in our society still is the gender issue and how our societies and the system is so patriarchal and sexist in many ways. And yeah, last year in my home country, Greece, there were like 18 women in a year that got murdered by their husbands. And there was a huge protest about a woman like finally found the courage and organizing and reporting the sexual abuse that they faced through all of these years. So we had a lot of that going on. And yeah, during that time I was thinking a lot about, music that reflects that, and it came to my mind this song that I listened many years ago. It's a tune by, of course, the icon Nina Simone, and it's entitled For Women. So this is a story about 4 African American women, and through each character in the lyrics, through each story, like she exposes different issues that women are facing, from the fact of just being a black woman in the United States, through sexual abuse by white men, sex working, and slavery, and the post-traumatic generational effect that it has. Yeah, this tune was released in '66. We are like 6 decades away from it, and still women are oppressed and abused on every side of the planet. But I think we can find the answers to move in our societies to a better place through especially black feminism, reading and supporting that, and also women of color and indigenous women and women of the lower class. So yeah, what I tried to do is like I did an instrumental version of this tune, and I tried to recreate the emotional effect it has on the listener when he listens to the tune. So every chorus builds up, and it tries to take you to a place of anger for what all these women are facing all of these years. It has a lot of influences from contemporary music because Nina Simone was a person who always experimented bringing different things in jazz, like classical music, rock, etc. So yeah, I'll play you small clips from every chorus. Thank you very much. So the last topic I'd like to talk about has to do with mental health and the stigma that our societies have and bring to the people with mental health problems, and also how it's related to the socio-political and system we're living in. So I wrote this tune about a friend of mine. He passed away by suicide, and yeah, sometimes, depression, there's a lot of stigma and taboo. And when that is not addressed, it can lead to a suicide, which is something inevitable. Whereas, like, if there was that stigma and taboo, many times we can move on from depression just with some pills and, a therapy of 6 months, a year. So I think many times the cause of the depression is our societies, and we can see that during the times of financial crises or, the COVID pandemic era, how many more people passed away from that cause. And I think since our societies are unequal and fair, they promote problematic stereotypes, as Dr. Cornel West pointed out, and relationship dynamics between, gender, race, sexuality, and class. That's why we have more depressions. And I'll give you a simple example. If you're a man on the street or a woman or whatever, and you don't have enough money, you're from a low class, you don't have enough money to eat or have housing, of course you're gonna have depression and anxiety about this. And of course you won't have the resources to treat that. So yeah, the music I wrote, it reflects the stages of grief, and it's also a celebration of my friend's life. One of the motifs I used is developed subconsciously. I took it from one of his compositions, but it became something else. And it has also influence of Western classical music because it's something he used to do a lot. Yeah. Thank you. So here's my conclusion, and I think in order to make our societies egalitarian, we need to understand, first of all, the landmark historic events that happen, because from these events we are led to this point in our societies. We need to realize the connections we share with other oppressed groups and form international and intersectional solidarities with each other. We need to support grassroots movements because that is the change, how the change is going to happen. It's going to be a bottom-up change. And finally, I think we should make art that reflects that and supports the need for social change, something that happens very well at the 60s in the United States. So yeah, here's the acknowledgements. And my C is very much influenced from the works of Angela Davis, Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and Yanis Varoufakis. Here are some of the musicians that played, and I thank them very much. And I'd like to also thank the panelists. Of course, Patricia Zarate, thank you so much, because you create the environment for me, for my ideas to flourish and do the CE. And Chase Morin, my CE advisor, Marco Pignataro, and Danilo Perez. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. All right. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Can you hear me? Okay, maybe a little louder. Thank you. Can we put the light back on? Yeah. Yes, I know. Congratulations, Nikos. Now we're going to start the second part of the presentation where the panel is going to ask you questions or make comments. Unfortunately, Chase, because we were late, had to leave, but he left a message. But I will start with Patrizia being part of the. You want to start? Yes.
Beautiful, Nikos. So from Chase, congratulations on your successful and articulate presentation. I particularly liked the first piece dedicated to Cornel West, and I hope you continue in the multidisciplinary direction and developing your compositional and improvisational tools to powerfully communicate the message you care about. The social issues you present are powerful and important, and I look forward to seeing how you develop your music and presentation to affect others and affect change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen and Chase. And here, Patrizia.
Congratulations. I also really liked the first video. I think that's the whole, presentation, only that video, because, there's so much there. And there's also so much musically that you did that, that's a thing. It was well done. I hope you, continue doing that. I have a question for the future. It's clear, I think, the path that you want to take with music, and it's beautiful. I love it. I want to know, now that you have explored compositions and your music in groups, I'd love to see and know how is your vision as a bass player. How will you bring those two things together, that social activism part with the bass, the actual instrument?
Yeah.
Do you have a vision that you could maybe change paradigms with your instrument?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't know. I think many times I chose the bass, and also I don't want to be like in the foreground playing. I'm okay with being the band leader, but I don't see so much of the soloist aspect of the instrument. So, but I'm not sure, like, how do you mean exactly, like, besides that, like, how do you mean exactly the question, like?
I'm just thinking, like people, for example, I don't know, Steve Lacy used to talk about this all the time, and he would play solo concerts, for example, and he would, just take an interval, and he would make a composition out of an interval, and then he would make a whole piece out of an interval, and then he would just work out of one interval, and sometimes for months, sometimes for years. And then he kind of created his own sound in the horn. It was kind of, because he wanted that, that interval. You could do that with pretty much anything, because, especially if you believe in that interconnection between social issues or anything and music.
Yep.
You can take that, and it's going to affect your instrument no matter what. So it can come from that connection, but it can also come from the music, from the instrument. There are people like, for example, there's a Panamanian bass player called Alex Blake, who said the bass is a drum, and he plays the bass like a drum. Yeah. He says, and not even any drum. He says the bass is a djembe. And he actually, you hear him, and it's like hearing a djembe. And he invented new forms to play the bass. He plays with Randy Weston. You can see him with Randy Weston. So he studied, the djembe. He studied the connection with the African culture. He studied, and he transferred into the bass to the point that you actually hear a bass djembe now. So these are the things that are, that you could look for. But think about it.
Definitely, yeah, for sure.
Nikos. Thank you, Patty. A comment and a question. First of all, I feel like the way you find the thread between the songs compared to when I saw the first time, I feel like now it has a better perspective. So I want to congratulate you on that. And really, the first video, and the way you created that was really outstanding. And I'm very glad you made the decision to, present it as much as possible. The comment is, though, that I felt like the other pieces were a little bit underrepresented in terms of, playing it for your thesis. So that's a little comment where I felt like, I see why you wanted to, but I felt like we could have heard a little bit more of the other song. But maybe, this is a good scenario where maybe you can talk a little bit more about the music, and I know you have scores and things, so
For sure,
please
yeah.
feel free to comment about your compositional project, method, anything you want to share with us about the music.
For sure, yeah. I have also here the scores. I couldn't put on the presentation because most of them are through composed, so it takes a lot of space. I can speak for the second, third, and fourth a little more. So this is the second tune about the Greek junta, the military coup that happened. And it's actually a blues, but it's a little bit disguised. I try to use a lot the tritone interval because for me it has something that's twisted, that's how it sounds for me. So that's why I used it. And I created kind of like a clave that circles every 4 measures. And yeah, it's actually blues. It's a C to the F to the C to the G that stays for 4 measures. And then, yeah, I created a bass line on top of the clave that is played, as you can see, on the B section in the alto and the trumpet. And then there's the melody that comes on the C section, which I need to move down, which is played by the trumpet while the alto is still playing the bass line, the bass, the clave. So it's like all of these elements going together and moving forward. And yeah, also like the melody is from the blues tetrachord. Some of the aspects of it, they come from there. And the tetrachords moving up like minor thirds or from the tritone. And yeah, that's pretty much it about the composition. And the approach of the improvisation was like we watched the video a little bit and tried to match the intensity of the video. And yeah, I can move on from there unless you want me to specify something else. Okay. For the 4 women, so actually, yeah, the original tune, it has this bass line which you can see on the B section here. So this is not something I wrote. That's Nina Simone's tune, and the harmony is the same here on the B section. So basically, Nina Simone plays it. It's all the way the same. There's this small groove not small. There's this groove happening behind here. Not small at all. Wrong word. Sorry. And she tells the story of every woman, and all the emotional impact happens around the way she sings and the lyrics. So what I try to do is intensify the music on every chorus with different elements, and I'll explain. So the first section we played just trumpet and bass. And then here comes the interlude, the band enters. And then the second head, the second time around, it's with a whole band, but it's very close to the original. The groove is just a little bit more contemporary. And then on the C section here, I start reharming it. I take the bass line and I put it high up in the piano, showing that movement from bottom up that needs to happen also in our societies. And I just created like a reharm that I tried to lead it somewhere emotionally after the end of it to make it intensify. And then at the end of the third chorus of the melody, I did a transposition to E flat from A, and that's where the solo happens. I also tuned the bass to an E flat from E to have the low E flat, make it sound bigger and heavier. And yeah, we just solo here on this E flat augmented chord for a while, and then we took out the last head, which is supposed to sound very angry. The groove changes, the harmony is more out, and I mean, it's kind of like a Coltrane vibe to it, like it's a Coltrane blues. In a way, the approach I try to have with it, but with a more contemporary sound. So I mean, these are the chord symbols, but of course we stretched out the harmony and played different stuff. And yeah, that's basically it for this tune. We also used synths and some other stuff to create like a different environment, a little bit more darker. And then the last tune, it's a lot of pages actually. It's through composed, it's 17 pages. It's about, I mean, this is the first motive which you listen at the end. And I was writing the tune, that motive came to me, and then I realized that it's one of my friend's compositions, but in a different kind of action. So I started with a bass line, and the bass line moves to different directions, and this is supposed to be the stages of grief and how the emotions change all the time, but the melody is kind of static around the G, the middle G, to show the static place that I felt through that. I was feeling anger, I was feeling sadness, all this emotion, but I was still on the same place, and there's nothing that could change about that. So yeah, that's a little bit of the compositional elements, and then I took these two ideas and created the two solo sections, one from the bass line and the other one from the bridge, which is supposed to be more celebratory about his life. And then on the head out, it's the motive from the intro, which is supposed to be about my friend because it's his motive. Yeah, that's basically it.
All right. Congratulations, Nico.
Thank you.
Congratulations. It's nice to see that you really, have put an effort and love what you're doing. And my advice is to continue. You have any plans? How are you gonna develop this?
Yeah, actually, especially before Berklee, I used to play a lot for movement concerts that were like, anti-racist concerts, or for immigrants, because we have a lot of immigrants in Greece, and refugees, actually, not immigrants, refugees. But usually when I played these concerts, it was just music, but it didn't fit necessarily with what was happening. So I think what I would like to do is, with the next opportunity on something like that, to have music that is specific for the topic, and not just music as a secondary thing that is, gonna bring people there or raise funds or whatever. So that's something that I would, definitely like to do with that on, the next opportunity that I have. I think it's great. And I think I really want to do this, and I did this to see, it's not about necessarily putting it out. I just listened to Cornel West speaking and I heard music. So it's more of me, like it's a need that I have. It's not for me to become more famous, and I don't want to approach it in that direction. I think it should be just to serve the purpose. So I think playing it for a concert, for movements that they bring social change in a way that I agree with, that's a good way that I would like to approach it, I think, in the future.
Good. As you do this process and as you develop, is always come from the music, like listen to, keep developing, find ways to, when you talk about the blues, it's also an open door to include all bunch of connections with the tetrachords from where you come from.
Yeah, for sure.
Always remember these are open-ended journeys. There's more to invest. Challenge the sounds you have already. Challenge yourself into what you think is correct or incorrect, and let the incorrect be the correct as you deal with these topics. That first thing you did with Cornell there's something there. Stay on, man. There's something going on, and see if you can imitate his sounds. The Afro-American blues has to do with tones, also. So congratulations, very proud of what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, Nico, thank you.
You're done.
You're done.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being